the model they've shown us is not accurate. So let's not assume that their boundaries are legit. So going to Antarctica or beyond is sort of analogous to going beyond the establishment control of narratives. It means taking a perspective outside because, as you said, it's not really as simple as black and white, left and right, but within their controlled paradigm, it is. They don't have a middle ground. You're either on one or the other side of this central divide in their political horseshoe. That's why I say you have to be anti-anti. You can't just be anti-pro because the anti-position is controlled. So you have to be anti-pro and anti-anti. So where does that leave us? I say it's non. I don't drink Pepsi. I don't drink sugary carbonated drinks. Am I anti-Pepsi? No. I'm a non-Pepsi drinker. I'm a non-smoker. I'm not anti-cigarette, anti-alcohol. I just don't drink and smoke. So I'm a non. And I think similarly, when it comes to political issues, you don't have to take the anti. You can just be non, and that takes you outside of their controlled dialectic where you are forced into either or thinking.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And, it's this, we really, when we go off-world stage, you're handed an opportunity. And this is an individual opportunity. It's a very individual opportunity. Because although, here we're, talking to each other and conversing and exchanging ideas, but you are you and I am me. And your, let's say, perception and path is very singular, and so is mine, right? We don't have to agree on every single thing, and perhaps you go one way with your life and I go a different way, and that's perfectly fine. It's a very individual thing. We are given an opportunity to exactly explore beyond those limitations, and where it leads us is to actually observe life for what it is, not for what we were formatted to perceive it as, a world of extremes, but for what it exactly is, right? And that same last live stream, I heard you feed a cat, right? The cat was meowing and so on. That very cat, he can be, purring and you're, doing belly rubs and so on, and he's a very gentle animal. That very cat can be an incredible murderer, right? A killer of rats and rodents and whatever.
I find mangled lizards on the sidewalk, and I know he's doing it.
So is he evil or is he an angel, right? Is he a demon or is he an angel? That doesn't exist. He's a cat, and a cat will kill, and the cat will purr and caress and so on and so forth. So this is what it really is, the opportunity that people probably don't realize how important this is. It is that it's not only that you find out about yourself, your own psyche, how you are, that you include all these things and that they have a healthy place. Aggression has a healthy place. In certain contexts, aggression is the correct response. But some people would think, no, aggression is always evil, right? There you go. You've missed out, right? You've deviated from life itself and became a programmed robot in that moment, or the opposite, right? People think
you mentioned Gnosticism, and I agree with the central idea of Gnosticism as in knowledge being superior to a belief that's been mediated through a media, through a priesthood. So the idea of Gnostics would challenge the power structure is simply that they believe you can directly know divinity. You don't need the priesthood. And moreover, that direct knowledge is attainable, without help. And what I'm bringing up here is that our view of media excludes what they tell us, and it relies on individual perception, which, when you perceive something that goes against what they say, is derided as conspiracy theory or crazy. So I consider what we're engaging in here to be a form of media Gnosticism. But one of the other points too, and this speaks to what you were just saying about our individual experiences, is that in addition to having a false worldview, we have to consider, well, what about our sense of self? If they've lied to us about the world, and they do so on a continual basis, are they lying to us about ourselves? Because you got the program and the programmed. And what does the program do to us? Does it truncate our concept of the self? Does it cut off any aspects? And so I think that's been one of the points I've been bringing up quite a lot lately, is that there is a form of what I call systemic gaslighting built into the system. So if you directly perceive something on the news as seeming phony, it's not like you can look around and say, or you tell other people, hey, this is fake, because they trust the screen. For you to make the case, you'd have to go outside of it. But you're being led by what? Your own intuition, as opposed to trust in the screen.
Absolutely.
So those of us who trust our intuition over the screen are taking a different path. And it turns out that to go along with the screen, you have to renounce your own intuition. And intuition is perception, which means doubting your perceptions, which is gaslighting. So in other words, you have to submit to a level of systemic gaslighting just to fit in their box. And so my question has been, well, what happens when you leave their box to your own perceptions? You become more aligned with your intuition. And what ramifications does this have outside of just media? And I've been finding that I believe that just as we have a false model of the world, I think we have a model of the mind that's lacking. And so that's kind of what I've been working on. What has been excluded and what is worth focusing on.
Yes, and that has been my, passion as well, of trying to figure out, and more or less my my works on that, and it is indeed key to get back individually, because this is who is to say that although every human being has in general, 2 arms, 2 legs, a head, a torso, and so on. Yeah, but how they are actually using, or in a sense, what vocations they have to use that body that is similar in all other respects is very individual. It's the same with the psyche. Who's to say that your psyche has to be the exact same as mine? Right? It doesn't, but you can only discover it by that very perception, that very self that you were talking about. I call it essence. But that gives you a direct perception on the world that tries to be filtered, or the system itself tries to have it filtered through a lens of these indoctrinations, these ideologies, these even scientific, postulations, and so on. And it is, for example, what is the distinction between a psychologically sane person and an insane person? It is a book that defines that these traits are considered a mental disease, and these traits are not. And that book, that I forget the name now, you probably know it.
Like the DSM series?
DSM, that's right. That book has been changed. I mean, every year is revised? Or something like that, right? And so that goes back and forth. There was a time that homosexuality was considered a mental disease. Now it's not. Probably now, if you're restless because you're bored as heck in a classroom, you consider to have a disorder as a child, right? Because you're restless, you're not paying attention to class. Yeah, if class is boring as hell, you won't be paying attention, right? Doesn't mean that you're mentally insane. But, what I'm trying to say is that the border, the frontier between sanity and insanity is defined by a book. And that should tell you a lot, because what is the definition? What is the frontier between a saint and a sinner? It's a book.
These are fair analogies. I've said before that what we're looking at here essentially is the authorities designating who is saved and unsaved. And what separates the two is faith versus doubt. The faithful who trust the system are sane, and those who doubt it are designated insane. And I think it's a huge inversion, because to be sane, to be faithful to the system, is to deny your own perceptions to a large degree. So there's this, the DSM-4 you mentioned, it's a very religious template in a sense that you can designate the sinners and those who need to be saved and the doubters, as though doubt is morally wrong and you get rewarded for faith. And I understand that in the context of religion in a sense, but when it comes to media, doubt should be built into it. Doubt is built into science, reasonable doubt and skepticism, but they've excluded that except in a very partisan way. So you can be doubtful of the other side, but don't doubt the essential story. And that's really what fundamentally keeps people trapped in the box is their faith in their own side, their lack of insight into the fact that if the other side can be all fake, so can ours.
Absolutely. Yes, that is exactly it. And it's a very individual thing. Because it's when you look at the world, let's imagine that we had not been indoctrinated, right? Because I think that the way that humans are very special in this regard, because the way that they learn is they gestate. The final stages of gestation happen outside of the mother's body, right? Because you see, for example, an animal. We talked about a cat. A cat, when he is birthed, just a few days later, he's ready. He's walking around and doing his cat thing, and learning from mimicry. Yeah, but he's doing his thing. A human, a human relies and depends upon the care for much longer. So it's like he's still gestating. He's not complete. He wasn't born yet entirely, but that gestation happens outside of the womb, outside of the body, right? So it is in that period of time, and we've all heard the expression that, toddlers are like sponges, in the sense that they absorb everything that is going on. Of course, they can't communicate, but they know emotionally, energetically, if you like, psychologically what is going on. And they absorb, and they, the way that they treat it is, oh, this is how it should be, right? And so it is so important, those stages of life. And that is why so quickly, as soon as basically is possible, toddlers are put into, collective indoctrination, like kindergarten and other sorts of things, right? Because that is a very essential moment in the formulation or the formation, let's say, of what will be the mind character that will take, the reins of that psyche later on, right? And yeah,
actually what Morpheus said. Didn't he say to Neo that we're born into bondage?
right.
And this is in the Matrix. And what does Matrix mean? Doesn't it mean womb? And
It's mother,
I think
yeah, something, yeah.
or mother. And the idea here is that we are essentially born into the system that we can't opt out of because we're vulnerable and we're still developing. And I think it's safe to say that everyone is programmed,
Mhm.
and that's the default.